So it's 9:05, November 3, 2021, and we're starting. Let me present my slide. Okay, so can you see my screen? Huh? Guys? Yes. Okay. So today we're going to discuss about mixed media techniques and how is it going to be different, or how you're going to um, mix them in terms of different kinds of mediums. So when you say mediums, this is it's either the solvent that you could use to make the paint or the pigment adhere to the canvas, or it could be like the solvent that makes the pigment or the paint thinner or fatter. Sorry, madilim ba? Yeah. So that is the difference between. Okay. So that is the difference between, so we have a solvent like, and we have another kind of medium that we could use to um, put in our paintings. So when you say medium, it is the solvent. When you say media, it is the things that we put, like paper, photographs, found objects, sculptures into our um, our painting. So yeah. How do I? Okay. So so mixed media covers a wide range of styles and art materials. It is also used. It is defined as to mix different creative mediums to create work that incorporates two or more art forms. So do you remember what your different art forms are, guys? Hello, anyone who wants to who knows what art forms are? Wala. So your art forms are, for example, you have a cubist style, you have different kinds of styles. So that is a form. You have an abstract. You also have expressionism, and you also have different kinds like collage or impasto, or and other kind. You also have um, oil painting, you have acrylic paintings, you have using oil pastel, you have charcoal painting. What else? So there's a lot of different art forms, and mixed media is concerned by combining those two or more different art forms. So mixed media was made um, in order to break the boundaries between different art forms. So um, so if, for example, if you're going to take a photograph, you can also paint over a photograph. So the photograph will not always remain as um, just a photograph, but there is a human touch on it. So there are also different kinds of sculptures that you could also paint on it, or put a different found objects. For example, a flower, or a leaf, for example, or clothes, for example. So that is your mixed media. So it's about combining different media, or mostly traditional media, such as watercolor, pastel, and then combining it to different kinds of non-traditional media like paper and other found objects. So, ayun. Do you get it? Guys, can you give me a thumbs up if you understand? Yes. Okay. So, when you uh, when when combining traditional media, it does not mean that you can combine anything or everything. Some media are not compatible with others. For example, acrylic paint does not adhere to oil paint. If you paint oil paint at the bottom, the acrylic paint would mostly slide off. So, why do you think that is? Why do you think acrylic paint would slide off? Guys, do you know the answer? Nobody knows the answer. So, hello, are you there, guys? So you don't know? Nobody knows? How sad. Oops. So before we go there, what's wrong with mine? Okay, so there are different kinds of mixed media. You have mixed media painting, you have collage and paper craft, you have mixed media sculpture, mixed media photography, and you can also do art journal or book with mixed media, and you also can make cards with mixed media and clothing. You can also use a mixed media with clothing. So, pero here we're going mostly to focus on painting. So there are tips on how to make mixed media painting. You could either mix the paint, and or you could also mix the techniques, and you could also put different kinds of media on the canvas itself. So for example, when you use different kinds of mixes, you could use watercolor with pastels or acrylic, and then layering the paper into wood into your artwork, for example. That is an example of mixed media painting, mixing different kinds of coloring materials. Techniques. You can also do different kinds of techniques. You can blend the paint washes. So, for example, you can have oil, alcohol, or for example, like the video that you saw earlier, that you can have what can you have? Turpentine, uh, what else? Poppy seed oil. So you can mix that. And you could also paint with a credit card, or you could also use stencils. And when you do mixed media canvas, for example, you could add textures or put memorabilia. For example, these are the found or the objects that you care most, and even rocks to your canvas. Sometimes you could also put sand on your painting. So here is the question: why does oil and water mix? Why does acrylic does not mix with oil paints? So does anyone have an answer to this? Anyone? Guys? Does anybody know? Wala?
Sa chemical po ata.
Sa chemical? What about the chemical?
Kasi ma'am yung
So,
oil-based po siya. So, hindi talaga mag-mix sa
yung oil base, and then, ano yun? Pakiulit?
Oil-based po kasi yung oil ma'am. Kaya hindi po talaga siya mag-mix sa water.
Okay, oil base yung oil paint, so hindi siya mag-mix ng water. How about acrylic? Why can't oil paint mix with acrylic? Or acrylic with oil? Do you know? Well, tama naman siya. What he said was true. But the main principle about here is that the same principle why oil don't mixed with water. So oil paint is oil-based from its name oil, and water is, and when you say acrylic, it is water-based. So that's why you cannot mix those two. But what you could do is you could put the acrylic on the first layer, and on top you could put the oil paint. But you cannot put oil paint under and then have acrylic on top. Otherwise, like on the video earlier, what happens is that it would scratch off, or it would eventually get removed. So yeah, it would chip off. So why is that? Do you remember what you watched earlier about the fat over lean? So the same principle goes here. So since oil paint is oil-based and acrylic is polymer-based or water-based, oil is hydrophobic in nature. When you say hydrophobic, it is water-fearing. So it is unpolar, and it tends to go away from the water. So that is why when what you see here, here, the water is, the oil is on top, and the water is below, right? So that is why it would chip off if the acrylic would be on top on the oil, because the oil would be like glossy and it tends to like stay away from the acrylic, I mean the water. So when the water evaporates on, or the wetness evaporates from the oil and the acrylic, it would, the oil will still be there, and also the acrylic will, the pigment will remain. So so there is no binder to the oil and the water. Yeah, so you need a medium to, there is no sufficient medium to do it, or to bind those two pigments together, different kinds of pigments together. So that is why when you put the oil paint at the bottom and acrylic on top, the acrylic would eventually chip off. Okay, so why is it when you put acrylic on the bottom and oil on the top, the oil will not chip off? That is because when acrylic is dry, the water would evaporate or would oxidize, so it would be dry, and the pigment will remain, or the medium. So that would be stable, and so the oil paint would can bind to it, right? So that is why the paint, it is okay for the lean or the acrylic to remain at the bottom and the oil on top, just like this one. Okay, do you have any questions? Do you understand? None so far. Okay, understood. So this is this is a table of medium compatibility. So like I said, not every medium is compatible to other mediums. So for example, like the acrylic and the oil. So some of this here has different kinds of pigments, different kinds of medium that could be used, sorry, so that it could adhere to paper or a canvas. So graphite, it is most graphite or lead pencil. It is often used as a sketching tool. It could be applied over dried watercolor, but it could be it is a universal medium that you could use under a dry or wet media, meaning charcoal, chalk pastel, or pastel, watercolor, acrylic oil. It can be used as a primary tool to paint on. So it goes under, not over. Charcoal can be applied over dried watercolor. So so you have a watercolor, and you could also put charcoal on top. And then it could also be used alongside contact crayon or chalk pastel. So you could mix the charcoal and the chalk pastel And you could also use it as a sketching tool under oil or acrylic paint. Under ha, hindi over. Charcoal could be used as a sketching tool under oil or acrylic, not over. Chalk pastel, it could be applied over watercolor, gouache, and dried acrylic. It cannot be applied on oil painting. All right, and it could not also be applied with oil pastel. So oil pastel, you could be applied this over dried watercolor, gouache, and acrylic. Over. So acrylic or watercolor or gouache at the bottom, and then over that you could put oil pastel. Remember, acrylic is water-based, so oil pastel goes on top. But it could also be used alongside and over oil paint. So since oil pastel is oil-based, oil paint is also oil-based, it could use those two can be used alongside, or so you could use both of them at the same time, and it could also be used over the oil paint. So watercolor, this is sometimes paired with endable ink for sketching, and it could also be used alongside and under the gouache. And then it could also be used as a ground for oil, acrylic, chalk pastel, and oil pastel. So it is okay with endable ink. It could also be used under or alongside with gouache, but it could also be used as a ground, meaning primary layer for oil, acrylic, chalk pastel, and oil pastel. Not on top, not over. So watercolor cannot be over when you use it with other kinds of media. And you also have acrylic. So acrylic can be applied over watercolor. So acrylic, when you apply watercolor on top of acrylic, the pigment would not remain. It would just slide off, or it would be different. It could be chipped off. Depends on how fat the acrylic is. And then it could also be used as a ground for oil paint. So when you say ground, it could use a primary layer or the first layer for painting, but it could not be used over the oil paint. Oil paint, this is the most very hard. Well, it's easy to paint using this oil paint, but it also is very expensive, and well, it has very certain characteristics that is that you have to think about. So oil paint could be applied over the dried watercolor and acrylic, but not under the watercolor and acrylic. So oil can only be applied over watercolor, acrylic, graphite, charcoal. So you could only use it over the dried watercolor. Does it make sense? Do you understand, guys? Do you have any questions? Let me drink. None? Okay. Is colored pencil included in the graphite medium? So there are different kinds of colored pencil. Wait lang. One at a time. So there are different kinds of colored pencil. There are colored pencil that are oil-based, and there are also colored pencils that are water-based. So for example, your favorite pastel that is water, that can be like used as a watercolor, that is water-based. So you could use it at like a graphite medium. The regular oil pastel, some of them has a little oil in it, so it cannot be used as a regular pencil. But I'm not sure really of its chemical, what's inside or how different leads the colored pencil are. But there are different kinds of colored pencils that are water-based and has little oil in it. But otherwise, it could be used like a graphite medium, and it could be used under all of these traditional media. ma'am, can we use markers on top of oil paint? So far that is not good kasi markers usually have markers is usually alcohol based. So oil and alcohol sometimes do not mix, and it depends on the polarity. So although oil and alcohol can mix a little bit, but there is a certain kind of polarity or density of oil and alcohol that can mix it together. So I am not sure about how dense oil and alcohol in a permanent marker, but it is better for you to use uh, it is better for you not to use permanent markers on top of the oil paint. Otherwise, it might chip off. And there are also acrylic markers, so you have to check. So there are different kinds of markers. You have alcohol based, and you have also markers that are acrylic based. So you have to check. What do you mean, or acrylic, Ariel? Do you mean that can marker be used on top of the oil paint? Yes, it can be used, but like I said, there are different kinds of markers, so I am not sure about how they can be used. But yes, you could use acrylic markers on top of acrylic paint. Does it make sense? And you could also use alcohol-based markers on top of acrylic acrylic paint also. Kasi oil and water can mix. I mean, oil and alcohol can mix. Okay? Any markers? What do you mean by any markers? Can you turn on your mic and explain to me?
As in any markers po, kahit ano markers na meron po sa sa bahay ko, or kung ano na parang kaya na bilhin po ma'am na mamimix po.
What kind of markers exactly? There are different kinds of markers. So
Yung regular?
Regular markers. So you have this one, a highlighter that is considered as a marker. You have something like this also. I'm not sure if this is a whiteboard marker. And oh, this is a permanent marker. So this is a permanent marker, and you also have this, a whiteboard marker. So you could just check on here. Oh, this is the permanent marker, and this is the whiteboard marker. You could check here. You could read. If you have something like this, you could read. So this is silent free, and it is instant drying, permanent marker, fiber tip, waterproof. So meaning it is alcohol based, and you could use it over acrylic, but yes, you could use it over acrylic, but not under the acrylic. On this one, you could, I'm not sure I cannot read because it's in Japanese. And this one, so you have to check the website of what it is made of. So basta yung basis lang, the basis of the theory or of how you could mix different kinds of medium is on its polarity, and or how oil, alcohol, and water can be mixed or not be mixed with each other. All right, so you did this experiment during your grade school years for sure, or high school years. So you know this already. All right. Do you have any more questions? Guys? None? So I guess none. So besides the traditional media, you also have the unconventional media. So You could use a ribbon or a cord, yarn, alcohol, inks, and magazine and caustic paint, and you could also use a collage. But let's start first with a ribbon or a cord. So a ribbon, you could also use that to create a dimensional outline. You could also make it a movable, press it over, place over the acrylic gel coated surface. And then when dry, you could also, when the acrylic dries, you could also coat it in place with a gel. So, ayun, or you could also use it with a glue and then paint it over with acrylic. And a yarn, it could create a very textured ground by coiling and winding. So it can be used under or over acrylic gel coated surface, surface, and then you could use a large brush to coat the yarn design. So you could use it with a clear gel. So remember your clear acrylic medium, gel medium, and your polymer gesso. And you could, pero when you use this on acrylic, you have to allow it to be dry before painting over the medium. So yarn with glue, and then you could put it on glue or gel medium, or and then polymer gesso on top, and then you have to make it dry and then paint over it. So you could do that. And then alcoholic alcohol inks. So like we discussed earlier, we have the markers as well. You also have different kinds of inks based, like it also comes in different colors. You could find it on National Bookstore or or any art store, professional art store. So this is highly pigmented, fast drying inks, and it works on mostly of all surfaces, such as glossy paper, glass, plastic, and metal. So if you were going to apply it, you can tilt your surface as you apply it to create a movement and interesting blends. So you could also mix it with water and other kind of mediums too. Kasi alcohol can be mixed with water. So ayun. Kasi yung alcohol has OH, right, on its chemical compound, and water is H2O. So that's why you could mix alcohol and water sometimes. And you could also use water to dilute the alcohol. So magazine transfers. So you could coat your surface with acrylic, soft gel, and place the magazine face down. Smooth it with a credit card and let it dry. Then lightly sand the image and spritz it with water before rubbing with your fingers to remove the paper. So this is what you call magazine transfer, or you could actually use any what do you call this? Any paint, any kind of paper into it. Sorry, my voices. So what you're going to do is have a gesso, acrylic gesso or acrylic gel, or what do you call it? Or emulsion, acrylic emulsion. And then you could place the magazine or paper face down. And then when it's dry, so you can smooth it over it, or you can crumple it, whatever you want. And then after it, when it's dry, you have to wet it and then lightly sand it. So tatanggalin mo yung paper. But what's going to happen when you remove the paper on the canvas is that it would retain the color or the words. Let me show you. I have a sample painting here. So can you see this one? This is my painting. This one with the apple and the ants. So if you could see it, oops, sorry. If you could see it closer, there are words here. So the whitish thing is the newspaper na I wasn't able to fully sand away, but you could see how the words are embedded into the acrylic. or on the painting itself. So that's an example. So let me go back to my room. But do you get it? And then when you use the encaustic paint, let me sit. So when you use encaustic paint, suddenly it's getting hot. So when you use encaustic paint, it is a mixture of beeswax, resin, and a pigment. So you could make it use with, you can make your paintings buttery soft, and you could use it to collage with wax instead of glue. And then you could also heat the paint to 200 degrees Fahrenheit and apply with natural bristle brushes. So I haven't tried this, to be honest, but this is the example. So beeswax resin is oil-based. So beeswax is a little bit, beeswax is a little bit, it's like, how can I, it's like a candle that's very hard when it's dry. So you have to heat it. And then resin is also really soft, or it depends on how you put the resin in. But there are different kinds of resin. There's very buttery thing of the resin, and it could also have a dry resin or a hard resin. So, but what you're going to use here is the buttery one. You mix it with pigment, and then you could use it to paint. But the thing is here is that when it's dry, it's going to be really hard and stuff. But when you paint it, it's going to be really hot because beeswax is very hard. So you have to really melt the beeswax, the resin, and then you mix it with the pigment. And then what you're going to apply is with the natural bristle brushes, yung matigas, the hard one. So that's what we're going to do. And then collage. So when you collage, you could use an acrylic matte medium or a soft acrylic brush to adhere the variety of papers to your surface. So you could use a magazine clipping or old music scores to tissue or specialty papers. And then after that, you could seal it with a matte medium as it would dry clear. So gel medium or a matte medium. Ayan. Do you have any questions? Guys? None? Okay, none. So let's go to collage and paper craft. So you could use a collage or a paper craft by doing printmaking. You could also use a torn paper collage, geometric diagram collage, and origami and sculpture. So printmaking, you could use variety of simple techniques to create your textures within your paper. So and you're going to print it, and you could also do different kinds of, you could lay out it before you're going to print it. And then torn paper collage, you can add some storybook magic with the creation of paint and found images. So basically torn paper, so you're going to tear the paper and then paint it on some found pages. And then geometric diagram collage, you could, this is about cutting naman and different diagrams, and then you could do it like marbling, drizzles, and splatters. And then you also have origami and sculpture. So you do know what is origami. So it is the art of paper folding, Japanese art of paper folding. So you could paint also your origami or your paper sculpture. So and when it comes to mixed media sculpture naman, you could use it with right kind of glue, and then you could use it with, there are different kinds of glue, right? There are the hot glue, the super glue, you have a regular glue, and you also have the stick glue and other stuff. So with the mixed media sculpture, you can use different kinds of glue to stick different kinds of stuff together, like a wire, a Lego, for example, a dress, a ribbon, or a feather, for example, or a leg, or a backpack, or something like that. So that's what it means to have a mixed media sculpture. And then carving, you can carve different kinds of materials from pumpkins to books to ice. And then you could also mix them up together. So crochet, an embroidery, you could crochet a pillowcase, for example, or a plushie for like a teddy bear or a small sculpture. And then you could also add embroidery patches on it. You could also paint over the crochet or the embroidery and then glue this on whatever elements. So, ayun. And then in photography, you could add environments, create surreal effects. So this is usually done on Photoshop or other mixed media type. And then you also have painting and textures. You could use digital photo manipulation with traditional painterly effects. So you manipulate the photo or edit the photo, and then also paint over this this photo. So, ayun. And then simple vector shapes, you could use simple lines and shape to create a stark contrast with the subject. So you could also use different kinds of shapes to your photograph. So after this, I'm going to ask you to make an essay. If you don't have any questions, do you have any questions for me before I tell you what your is there anything you want to ask me before I tell you the exercise that I'm going to assign you to? Guys, no questions so far? None? Okay. So let's go to your assignment. So this is an assignment, actually a homework. So the deadline would be on November 24. So you have how many weeks? You have 4 weeks, 3 weeks. No, 4, including today. No, 3 weeks, sorry. 3 weeks to finish this. So that I want you to make an essay on what it means to when you have to paint on fat over lean. So you have to answer this on your essay. So the minimum is, sorry, not 300, but 500 words. You have a minimum of 500 words and you have to turn it on Google Classroom. All right? Do you have any questions? Guys? Sorry, my sister is coming in and out of my room. Anyway, all right, and for your plate, you're going to experiment mixing 2 or more mediums. And on your plate, the theme is to encouraging people to vote wisely. So election time is very near, it's already here. So you have to make an artwork to encourage people to vote wisely. And no text allowed in the composition. So meaning no words allowed on the painting. So you cannot paint vote wisely directly. So you have to show me how to encourage people to vote wisely, or make the painting itself, make the people or the audience who sees your painting to vote wisely. So, okay, and the deadline is next week. Sorry, next week? No, on 17, sorry. The deadline for this is on 17. And then next week, 10, you're going to, sorry, November 10, you're going to do this. So we won't have a synchronous class. We are going to have a synchronous class and you're going to do your plate. And then, ayun. Is that clear? Guys? Yes, all right. So 17 is the deadline, okay? So, ayun na.
Ma'am,
Yes?
di ba we're gonna meet on November 10 habang gumagawa ng face body? Ano
No,
po, just
we're
gonna check on our progress po, ma'am.
We're not going to meet on November 10, but you can email me your progress. If you want me to check on your progress, if you have any questions regarding on your progress, or you want me to comment on your progress, that's free. And or you want to consult with me on your progress, you can email me. All right. And so, ayun. But November 17, we're going to have asynchronous classes. So we're going to have a lecture again. So bale, you have 2 weeks to finish your plate. All right, that's enough time, right? To finish your plate. And then on the next week, no, 1, 2, 3. And then on the 3rd week of November, you're going to submit the essay. Okay, is that clear? Guys, no more questions? No more questions, then I'm going to dismiss you early. And okay, I'm going to dismiss you early. And for those who haven't finished some of the works before, please finish them and submit them as soon as possible. So, ayun. Okay, class dismissed. Thank you for coming in. Bye-bye. You're welcome. Welcome. Good luck. Have fun painting.